15 to 20% of the population identifies as being highly sensitive. But what does that actually mean? Here are 5 signs that you might be a highly sensitive person. These 5 criteria come from Dr. Elaine Aron, who is a pioneer and expert in the field of studying highly sensitive people. In fact, she coined the term back in 1996. I'll put a link in the description below to her work. So one way to look at being a highly sensitive person, or HSP, is that in general, you pick up on and process more information from the world around you than the average person. This can show up in a lot of different ways. I want to overlay Elaine Aron's DOES, or DOES framework of the 5 criteria, and then explain some examples for each one. All right, number 1, depth of processing. Processing information more deeply. Highly sensitive people are oftentimes very creative, and creativity is all about connecting seemingly unrelated concepts together. Highly sensitive people tend to process everything more. They're relating and comparing what they see to their past experiences and knowledge. And researchers have shown that highly sensitive people tend to have more activity in the region of the brain which is called the insula, which is linked to an awareness of one's body and oneself, what it means to be human. This depth of processing might mean that you need more time to process life events. For example, I spend a lot of time just sitting in my apartment and thinking and connecting dots together and allowing new meanings to form. So for highly sensitive people, it may take longer for them to reach decisions. Some people may think that they're living in their heads, but generally they enjoy reflecting on things. And because of this heightened awareness, they're more aware and in tune to what's going on inside of them and outside. They also tend to dislike small talk for this reason. I find for myself that I have a hard time with small talk because I'm typically picking up on a lot of information that's below the surface of what's being discussed. And it's really uncomfortable for me to not be able to address any of that. So I really like having more deep, meaningful conversations because it feels like it's real. Number 2 is overstimulation. So because of this depth of processing, highly sensitive people can become easily stressed by overstimulation, and there can oftentimes be a burnout or a fatigue by having to process so much information. For example, you might need more alone time or time in nature to come back to a state of equilibrium. Maybe after being at a party or event with a lot of people, you might feel like a sponge that's just completely saturated and you need time to empty out and recharge again. You might be sensitive to loud noises or strong scents, or if you are particularly empathic, sometimes just being around a lot of people, even in a quiet environment, can also be a lot of stimuli. So for myself, I consider myself to be a fairly balanced introvert-extrovert as a highly sensitive person. And in some cases, I actually love being in stimulating environments, like going to concerts and things like that. But I find that afterward, I need a lot of time to recover because it just gets to be a lot. So with prolonged exposure to too much stimulation, I can really get to a point where I feel kind of burnt out and I sort of lose touch with my own desires and needs. An example of this would be during the pandemic. So with the state of the world and the constant news cycle, it was really overstimulating for me. And I ended up beginning a monthly ritual of going to a hermitage once a month and spending the weekend there in silence, connecting to nature, unplugging from my devices, and just getting really grounded again. I also know that if I'm traveling for an extended period of time, I can oftentimes get to a point where I've taken in so much stimuli that I can kind of become full, like I can't take on anything else. I remember coming back from a trip to Greece and Turkey with a partner at the time, and we had a long layover in Amsterdam. And although I wanted to go out and explore and enjoy this new place, I basically had no capacity left, and I was just kind of wandering around in what I like to call airplane mode, where it's like I'm there, but I'm not really there. So So that overstimulation piece is really a reality. Number 3, emotional reactivity. Highly sensitive people tend to react more to both positive and negative experiences. The highs oftentimes feel much higher than the average person, and the lows also can feel more low. I can definitely attest to this. One metaphor that I really like, though, that I think puts a positive spin on this is that like if you imagine this like a piano as being kind of the range of human expression and emotions, being able to experience the depths of the lows give you access to experience the highs, and it I think allows for a really rich and beautiful experience. So in an unbalanced expression of a highly sensitive person, or when a person is not maybe in touch or taking ownership of their own emotional landscape and their needs, this can come out as emotional volatility. But in a healthy expression, when the person's in touch with themselves in a meaningful and continuous way, like I said before, it can mean that we feel life more deeply, and it can really, it can be beautiful. People that are highly sensitive can be profoundly moved by life events, music, art, cinema, etc. The 4th sign, which is pretty obvious I think to most people, is empathy. So highly sensitive people have both a greater cognitive and emotional empathy. Cognitive empathy being knowing how another person is feeling, and emotional empathy is actually experiencing the emotion that the other person feels for themselves. So highly sensitive people are more likely to actually feel the emotions, both positive and negative, of other people and have a greater understanding for what they are going through. Have you heard of mirror neurons? These are neurons in our brains that fire both when we perform an action and when we see someone else performing the same action. Research has shown that highly sensitive people generate more activity in mirror neurons than other people. So there are obviously pros and cons to having this level of heightened empathy. On one hand, it creates a visceral experience with the world around us that feels hyper-connected and even spiritual. This leads to being oriented with an imbued sense of kindness and generosity. However, having too much empathy all the time can lead to neglecting one's own needs, an inability to set good boundaries, and sometimes being predisposed to toxic, unbalanced relationships. You might be wondering, what's the difference between a highly sensitive person and an empath? So there's definitely some crossover, but some important distinctions too. I want to actually dive into those further in a future video, and I'll link it up here once that's published. The 5th sign is sensing the subtle. If you're a highly sensitive person, you may notice that you pick up on details that other people miss, whether it's seeing underlying patterns, colors, shapes, textures, sounds, or nonverbal cues. There's a full spectrum of life that does not go unnoticed by you. If you're an artist, this may make you an amazing painter, designer, or musician. If you're in the healing profession, you may have a keen intuition that allows you to identify the root of a problem and maybe save someone's life. In business, your eye for detail might realize new opportunities or improve group dynamics. In healthy expression, experiencing life in this way can be rich and rewarding. But in an unhealthy expression, this ability to sense the subtle might result in obsessive tendencies that can lead to analysis paralysis or, again, burnout. All right, so there we have it, the 5 signs of a highly sensitive person: depth of processing, overstimulation, emotional reactivity, empathy, and sensing the subtle. I want to again thank Dr. Elaine Aron for her amazing research and for that 5-part framework. In future videos, I'm going to talk more about ways to keep all of these areas flowing and well balanced. A healthy, highly sensitive person has the ability to adapt in the present moment so that you can realize your sensitivity as a gift instead of a burden. These are all like dials on the control panel of life that we want the ability to turn up and down as needed in the moment. I hope this video helped you to better understand the term highly sensitive person, and maybe it's given you some greater insight into yourself or other HSPs in your life. If you think I missed something or want to contribute your own perspective, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. And if you like this video and want to get more content for gifted, sensitive souls, be sure to subscribe to this channel and set your notifications to get updates. Thank you for watching.